Blake and Jeff, joined by Patrick Johnston of the province, who joins us every week here and will throughout the course of the Canucks season on Sekeres and Price. The hockey season, if you will, Patrick, which has begun? Question mark?
The first day of school is the beginning of hockey season? I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's hockey season in Europe. I don't think of hockey season until really, we get to the week of training camp.
Are you going to Penticton? There's people playing competitive-ish games in Canucks jerseys in Penticton.
I suppose I've always enjoyed the idea of the prospects camp.
Yeah.
I kind of lump. I mean, I know, and of course, juniors started. All that started.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess hockey. I've never pondered when does hockey season start. I suppose it's now. I've always thought of it sort of training camp, but that's only one season. That's the NHL season. The rest of hockey has already started. So I suppose if you make me say something, I will say, sure, this week it'll start. That's when we start.
Phew. Thank goodness. The Canucks continue to skate. We'll get to that in a second. We have also marked today as the 10-day countdown starting for Tyler Myers' bonus to be paid out, which is with a wink and a nudge to some degree, but also there is still a small possibility that is of consequence to the Vancouver Canucks and its roster for training camp and opening night.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, as we've been saying since, June, when Frank Saravelli first floated the idea that there is a trade on the table. I mean, nothing's ever really been refuted. And of course, the San Jose Sharks have moved on from Erik Karlsson. In theory, they have a hole to fill. I guess we'll see what happens. Yeah, I mean, big pile of money due to Tyler Myers. Oddly enough, I mean, this is the one thing, to go back to the original question. Training camp is so late. I haven't really figured out why. I mean, normally it felt like it would be the middle of September. It's not till, the 21st, still 3 weeks away, really.
Mm-hmm.
Or 2.5 weeks, I suppose. Yeah, it's certainly the timing. If you're looking for things to chatter about before training camp, the timing is interesting. So we'll see. Yeah, big pile. I mean, happy September, Tyler Myers, no matter what. That's a big pile of money coming your way in the last year of your contract.
Yeah, he comes out the big winner regardless. He's getting the big bump there on the 15th. I know you wrote about Troy Stetcher's pro development camp out in Richmond last week, and Tanner Pearson appeared to be a full participant, which is interesting. I mean, as we sit here a couple of weeks out from camp, it certainly looks now like Tanner Pearson is going to be in Victoria as a hockey player and not an LTIR candidate for the Vancouver Canucks. But it begs the question, after 10 months off, what is he to the Vancouver Canucks, do you think?
Well, first of all, yes. I mean, I went out there on Thursday and they played a scrimmage, and there he was skating involved. As a side note, I mean, I didn't talk to Pearson. It was obvious he was playing. You could see, and I spent a moment talking to Troy Stetcher, and he was absolutely delighted about how well the sort of, obviously, I think he knew the camp was going to go well. It was a Derek Popke show off the ice. They had Yard Athletics involved. They were very excited. But the community response kind of blew him away. And so standing outside the arena after they had come off the ice and were, in the Sockeyes room getting changed and came out, and there's just the back door there coming over to wherever they parked, the swarm of kids that descended on Tanner Pearson, you couldn't help but feel good for the guy.
Mm-hmm.
That here is a Vancouver Canuck, and that's all that mattered. And the kids saw him as that, and they couldn't wait to get his autograph. And there he was, signing autographs with his, with his hands. Hands looked fine. I fully expect that he will be there at training camp. Now we've seen it. Obviously there were the rumblings for weeks on end, but now we've seen him skate. Obviously he still has to show that the strength is there, and he has to be able to play in some games and be a factor. I do think the sort of budgeting question, that there is essentially $1 million gap in how you build the roster and what they need to save, and the amount of money they would save off his cap hit by putting him in the AHL. I wouldn't be surprised if that's an option we see here, certainly to start. You pencil in the lineup. Obviously, he's not way down the depth chart. Niels Höglander has to show, Vasily Podkolzin have to show that they are more ready to go than he is, and that the team feels that they are better options than he is. But yeah, certainly he'll be in the mix. And I'm sure he will play NHL games for this team this year. I mean, he is an NHL forward. He may not be, he's never fleetest of foot, but he's a smart player. I just knows the game, and he knows what he's doing, and he's figured out a way as the years have evolved to remain a very useful player. And obviously the role he's going to fill may not match his salary, but he won't be the first player in that type of situation. We just mentioned Tyler Myers. So as it stands, I think there's every reason to think he is going to be in the mix. Whether he's on the open rank roster, I think is a different question, right, but certainly he'll be in the mix come training camp.
But a couple of weeks out from training camp, just which is a bigger issue, do you think, or in your mind, when you think of Tanner Pearson, is it the hand or is it his feet?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And certainly you look at the lineup, the way they want to play, being a smart player in your 30s only takes you so far in what is more and more a young man's league. Absolutely, Jeff. I think that's the big question. And I think that is one of the reasons why we sit there and think, well, maybe he will start the year in the American Hockey League. That is something he's just going to be a call-up guy. I mean, Phil DiGiuseppe is not a fleet of foot guy, and as a result has been a tweener for quite some time. You look at the guys who are tweeners, who have enough ability, enough talent, all that. Tanner Pearson's a better player than Phil DiGiuseppe, I think. Obviously a few years older, but the feet are everything, and the feet are I think unfortunately the first thing to go. I mean, we saw, obviously, if you have any issues, we saw the OEL experience last year. If you can't get there, there's not a lot you can do, and that is the big question. I think we've solved the question: can his hands do it? His hands probably can do it. Still has to show, but in the end, the feet are kind of everything. And if you can't get there, then there won't be a role for him. I think that's the other thing to consider.
They don't even need to call it a conditioning stint,
No,
because I don't think they're worried about him being claimed off waivers. And if he did, that'd probably be a benefit to them to some degree. Mm-hmm. But he has to be expecting it, right? He has to be expecting that, given all that he's gone through, how far removed he is from competitive play, he kind of has to be expecting that he's going to be playing some games in the AE to start, doesn't he?
Well, you go back to the press conference we had with him in April, and he sort of set his hierarchy of priorities. And number one, he just wanted to play with his kids. That he was still sitting there. It's amazing. You still go back and look at those photos that we got at the press conference, and he had that big that big splint on his hand. He just wanted to get his hand strength back, and down the list was being a hockey player again. So now he's presumably in that range. He just wants to show he can be a hockey player again. Now, obviously, he wasn't like he was struggling before he got hurt. So that, I'm sure in the back of his mind is going, well, what are we talking about here? I'm still an NHL player, clearly. But in the end, he's got to show that. I mean, the foot speed is going to be a problem as you go through your 30s. The hand, assuming it's healed, you still have to remain productive. And that's the thing. He's been a pretty productive player in Vancouver. But if he's not being productive, then that starts to be an issue for him.
I'm not terribly surprised that we haven't heard a PTO name yet, but if we're talking next week and there hasn't been a PTO, is that more interesting to you?
I still kind of think where I was at last week. I mean, there are times when a PTO makes some sense. We saw Danny DeKeyser last year, and trying to see, okay, is there something left in a veteran big left shot defenseman? And they discovered there wasn't. Mm-hmm. You look back and there's not a ton of spots there. It's funny. I know Alex Edler, he's out there. I don't have any idea if that's something that's possible, if that's even something you look at. But that certainly would be a fascinating storyline if he was able to come in. But we'll see. I have no sense one way or another. I look at the roster. I don't see necessarily a hole, but that's never stopped teams from bringing guys in on PTOs before. I don't think there's a Jack Skilly type PTO here where they come in and win a spot bizarrely at a training camp. But
Alex Chason did it 2 years ago.
Chason did it 2 years, absolutely. Alex Chason, and he's going to do it again, I guess.
He's trying, yeah.
we'll see. The PTO element to me always has been more about having enough veterans for your preseason games. I'm not sure the Canucks are going to be as stretched in that regard as they might have been in the past. But the thing I think more than anything, I've said, I can't remember how many times I've said this to Jeff now, but in the 5 years doing this job, the biggest thing I've learned is you never say never to anything.
Well, and as Jeff has pointed out too, the wisdom that comes out of this man, Ethan Bear is sort of a pocket PTO, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like he can sort of break under glass in a few months and maybe extract an Ethan Bear if you need to.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's I think, you know, I haven't talked to Ethan a month ago when I wrote about his hockey camp. Pretty much that you kind of had a feeling that's kind of how he's looking at things. He recognizes that he's going to fit in a spot when he's ready, and hopefully there's a team out there. And, you know, I think he hopes that it's the Canucks that are the team, but if there's a different team that needs a right shot defenseman and there's an opportunity there, he's going to jump for it. And that in many ways is, you know, I mean, I think teams know that he'll be able to play. It's not like he's dealing with a foot injury or a hand injury or something like that. It's, you know, obviously he has to recover from a shoulder injury, but it was not an unusual shoulder issue. He could, very well be that guy that you bring in later on and you get a little boost mid-season, and I mean, that's almost like, I suppose that's the reverse PTO. You're aiming high as opposed to seeing what's there.
It was last Labor Day weekend a year ago that JT Miller got his extension. Right. Obviously, it kicks in now. What, if anything, changes? Like, if you ask JT, he would say nothing. You know, and it's not like he was making pocket change and now he's making $8 million.
Yeah.
But, you know, you are associated with the dollar figure that you're attached to with your contract. Yeah. What do you think changes, if anything, just in terms of expectations and pressure and those types of things around JT Miller?
Well, the expectations are obvious. You know, he's being paid to be a frontline player, whereas, you know, it was sort of like, hey, that's great. He's a good value player for a long time. Now he's got to produce. He's got to keep producing. I do think from his standpoint, and, you know, obviously when your conversations are essentially limited to what you get in the dressing room, they can be, you know, a lot of players are careful with their cards. I feel like I have talked enough with JT Miller over the years to have a bit of a sense of what he thinks of himself, of his role as a player, of his role in the room as a leader. Obviously, he's a vocal guy. I mean, I've talked about this on end, you know, more than once. He's brought it up himself, knowing that, you know, his instincts to be loud can get him into trouble, and that he needs to find a bit of a happy medium. But he's still going to be vocal and forceful and be that type of player. And I think and he's talked a bit about it. I mean, looking back at last year and how you know, poor the start was going, you know, basically tried to think he could fix it all himself. And then it almost, you know, you watch the way things went and the number of times he was caught standing still. It's almost like he went sort of too far around and stalled himself out, if you will, pushed the gas too hard, flooded the engine. Is he a player that's going to be able to kind of figure out how to regulate that well? We talk about 30s. I mean, this is the player he is. So, you know, I think he is very much aware of what the contract means. I don't think he's a guy that's necessarily going to take the foot off the gas, because he does like to win and he does like to compete. That's what's driven him his whole career. Like I said, the weight of expectations will be there now. I think he's aware of it. We'll see how he handles it.
Patrick, getting closer, inching. Really, 2 more pre-training camp hits. Looking forward to those, and we'll be getting set for Penticton next week, of course, as well. So thank you for this, sir. We're almost there.
Almost there, guys. See you soon.
Tackle all the hills with ease and don't arrive at work all sweaty. Get around the city on electric transportation that fits your lifestyle and get it at bestbuy.ca.